Lucky zip codes. So if you've been in St. Louis for more than 48 hours, somebody will inevitably ask, what high school did you go to? Zip codes mean something, but where we live, where our zip codes are directly correlated to the resources that our schools have. And that's why it's really important what zip code you're in. 63121 is Normandy. It's an under-resourced, unaccredited school district. 63124 is Ladue. The people who live in Normandy pay 13% tax rate. The people in Ladue pay about 8%. It is like a sky and river parallel universe. This isn't about good teachers. There are good teachers in lots of spaces. But in some schools, kids can't take their books home. In other schools, they're abundantly resourced. So what zip code you're in does matter. So I started doing a little research about where zip codes were located and who was in which zip code and what that meant for schools. So a lot of times people will come to our town and they will ask, where's the best school district? Where should I live? And they will be given some advice, usually around zip code status. We're going to use critical race theory to do that. Now, critical race theory is a little complicated, but we're going to pick just property. So what critical race theory says is that property rights are assigned to some people unjustly and to others. So we looked at critical race theory and we looked at housing first, and we looked at land ownership first. There are a couple of key, really important moments in US history that we want to pay really good attention to. The first one is Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion is like super cool, really cool historical moment because the poor and working class people were going to overthrow the rich people. Sounds like a cool moment, doesn't it? Yeah. And the rich people gave the poor and working class white people land. And there was never a rebellion. That's important. The other places that we want to look at, places where the government was helping with land ownership. So VA loans, GI Bills after World War II. Really important. Really important because white Americans that were kind of working class moved from working class to middle class in just the same generation. It is one of our largest government handouts we've ever seen, and it was unequally distributed, meaning that African American people didn't get to access those resources in the same ways, even though they had served their countries. But it forever changed the trajectory around intergenerational wealth and who was going to be located in a lucky zip code. It worked so well, we haven't had to do it again. For example, if I bought a house in Clayton 50 years ago, for $20,000, that house would be worth what? $800,000, $400,000 now? Great investment, right? But because the GI Bill and the VA loan were not equally distributed, because we had racial covenants, I couldn't have bought a house in Clayton 50 years ago. It was illegal. So this isn't about luck necessarily, and it isn't about people who work really hard. We made up these words like meritocracy. Anybody heard of that word? If you work really hard in this country, you'll get rich. Does anybody know anybody who works really hard who isn't rich? So it will take more than that. But the reason why land is important is because where you're located often depends on just the resources that you get with school. So I mentioned racial covenants. That's also a really important law that happened here. And so here in St. Louis, even after racial covenants were abolished, the realtors would lose their license if they sold their home to an African American, and sometimes an African American or a Jew. It was written in our deeds to our homes. So it was illegal to do that. If I'd bought a house in North St. Louis 50 years ago for the same $20,000, would it be worth $400,000 now? No. Maybe 20, right? So looking at how intergenerational wealth happened with real estate is really important on how we got to be where we are. The last thing that I want to say about real estate is that we had racial covenants, we had the GI Bill, we had Bacon's Rebellion, and it has changed not just who we are, but then how we are situated. And we've used words that have transferred from housing, like zero tolerance policies, which started with housing, they were called broken window laws, into policing and sentencing structures, into our educational system. So we have 3 strikes you're out policies, not just in our justice system, but in our schools as well. So it went from housing to policing in schools Does that make sense? And we're using the same words. So we're paying attention to how some people got lucky and how some people aren't. And so I asked, how did we allow it to stay this way? Because we're all nice people. Cognitive dissonance. What I like about cognitive dissonance is that it really explains why we are still stuck the way we are, and that's a good thing. Explaining why we are the way we are gives us hope on how we're going to change it going forward. So cognitive dissonance, just what you think it means. Cognitive means that we're thinking, and the dissonance means that we're not close to one another. So we'll make up stuff like, poor kids don't try hard. Is that true? Nope. If we see a police officer and they're stopping somebody, they must have done something wrong. Cognitive dissonance gives us rationale. A lot of times we're talking about racism and people go like, you know, Amy, I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna move outside my comfort zone. I'm gonna do at least one culturally sensitive thing each day for the rest of my life, trying to get over this cognitive dissonance. And my reframe for that is, you know, cognitive dissonance is something that happens to us. But if we were trying to eliminate racism, I would equate that more to falling in love. That would be the opposite of cognitive dissonance. If I told you eliminating racism is like falling in love, has anybody ever been in love before? Yeah, it's pretty great, isn't it? We would run to each other to solve this problem. We would look for ways to be really close to figure this out with one another all the time, because that's how great love is. That's how wonderful it makes us feel. And that is actually possible. Fictive kinship. All right, so we're gonna play a little game here. Fictive kinship means that people who are not biologically related to you, you treat as if they are kin. How many people in here have a woman or a man that you feel is like your brother or sister? Right. And maybe even your kids call them aunt or uncle. Yeah? Yeah, okay. That's fictive kinship. What's really cool about fictive kinship is that it allows us to be connected and feel connected even though we're not biologically related. The other really cool part about fictive kinship is that it also shares two elements, pride and shame. So when something really wonderful happens in our life, we have a moment of being proud, not just for ourselves, but for the other person. When something sad or tragic happens, we have a shared shame. Does that make sense? All right. We can solve what is going on here in St. Louis, but also globally, if we use fictive kinship as a way to get close to each other and look for solutions. For example, one of the statistics that's often shared is that 50% of African American boys will not graduate from high school, 50%. If I told you 50% of the white males at Clayton High School are not going to graduate this year, we would do something different. It is the cognitive dissonance. It is the belief that something has happened to make that so. It is the distance from each other, that we are not treating each other as kin, that doesn't have us working towards solutions to create this reality. It is our lack of falling in love with one another that has given us the situation we're currently in today. And this is so solvable. One of the things that I love the most are words, obviously. Intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw, a wonderful scholar, created this word, intersectionality, and it really helps with this fictive kinship, which is Carol Stack's work. I read it initially in Melissa Harris Perry's book, Sister Citizen. And intersectionality helps us describe where we are today and where we'd like to be going forward. It is where the rubber hits the road. It is the places that we've seen recently with the recent events in Ferguson that will not allow us to ignore it, which just unsettle us so. Because the reality of the situation is that cognitive dissonance might be there, but love is what we are striving for all the time. Being connected is where we're trying to get to all the time, and we're trying to figure out the hows and whys. And intersectionality is the way that we notice this. The intersection between housing, law enforcement, and schools is huge. The intersectionality between our zip codes and our humanity is also connected. We are always, always connected. The intersectionality that we witnessed during Ferguson is also the place where we have an opportunity, because of a horrible tragedy, to make a positive change for the better. I was struck watching the interview with Michael Brown's mother that on the day that he died, she mentioned school. I'm a mom. I don't know if I would have been thinking about his experience to school with him laying in the street for 4 hours, but she made a connection to it and said it. She audibleized it that same day. She said, do you know how hard it was to get him out of school? He was on his way to college. I get that. I get that in a fictive kinship way, because even though I've never met her, I hear she's a wonderful person. Even though I didn't know her son, we are connected. She is my sister. And so I grieved when she grieved. I mourned when she mourned. But more importantly, the intersection between how police are perceived in Black and brown spaces and how Black and brown children are perceived in schools is very connected and fixable. Because if my kid is struggling in school, what do we do when our kids are struggling in school? We get them a tutor, we do extra homework, we talk to our teachers. There are lots of strategies that we do when we're invested in kids' success, and the intersectionality hits right there. So here in St. Louis, one of the wonderful things that we got to see during Ferguson was that the crowd was pretty diverse, which said to the people in Black space that white people here care. It was visible. It was noticeable. And regardless of what side you were on or what team you were on or whatever, it was a moment that the world was watching. And so I thought about all the talks. The talk that I gave to my children the first time was for school. So as an African-American parent, I give my child advice that is different than my white friends. Our lives are a little different. But the first conversation I had, the talk that I had with my kids, was around school. And I prepared them for school. So if your teacher says do only the odd math problems, you do odd and even, because you're gonna get really good at this. You're gonna keep practicing and we're gonna nail it. Math is a form of liberation. We're gonna get free through mathematics. I have 4 really good math students, I might add. The second talk that I had was with my twin sons, and they were about 10. We had made a deal that when the boys got to be about as tall as me, and I'm 5 feet tall, that we would have the conversation about how to prepare for when the police stopped them. We understood that their childhood would end way too soon based upon their height, not their age or their cuteness. And so when my twins were about 10, we had the talk with them, and we sat them down and we told them what to do and how to behave when the police should stop them. We told them exactly, don't smart off, regardless of what they say, do whatever they tell you to do. We just want you to come home. We'll handle whatever happens in between then, but we really want you to come home. We don't want to sit on the front pew. We don't want to identify your body as you're protecting your rights. We just really want you to come home. And so when my son was 12, I dropped him off in the Loop to hang out with friends, and his friends were drinking. So he walked home. I live in U-City. He walked home less than a mile away from our house. And he saw police officers circling, and he knew he was going to be stopped. He was about 5 houses away from home. And sure enough, at 12, he got stopped by the police. So he came home to me because he was 12 and he was flustered. And he was asking all these questions, and he was trying to get it all organized. And he said, but Mom, I'm, wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt and a belt, and it's tucked in, and I have on Sperry topsiders. As if his clothes could save him from the experience. I wish something he was wearing could save him from that experience. There's nothing he could wear, and I knew it. But he's asking me all these questions about what happened and why it happened. And so he said, you know, Mom, I want to know, like, is it because I'm black? And I said, I don't know. Maybe. He said, well, I knew you were home, so I was only 5 houses away, and I actually thought about running home to you. And I said, whatever you do, don't run. And then because he was 12, he had the tears at the bottom of his eyes caught, trying not to cry, trying to explain that he did exactly what the officer told him to do. And because he was 12, he continued to ask me a question. And he looked at me and he said, Mommy, I just want to know, how long will this last? And then I looked at my 12-year-old son with tears rolling down my face, and I said to him, for the rest of your life. The reason why I went to Ferguson is because I want this to stop. I want this to be the seminal moment that changes the way that violence happens, not just for my son, but for my daughter. I honestly believe that we are the right people to make a change in this community, to change it here in Ferguson and St. Louis, to be role models and examples of how to get this right and create the kind of world and reality that we'd like to see, to use the artist's lens and our imaginations to create a more equitable society where there are no lucky zip codes, where we can share in being St. Louis proud. And when people come to our town and ask us, where should I live for a really good school district? We can tell them, anywhere you'd like. There are no lucky zip codes here. All of our schools are good. All of our children are doing well. Part of our mission is not just to judge what's happening, but to join. And since fictive kinship is in the room right now, I'm going to consider you all family and us on the journey together. Looking forward to being St. Louis proud. Thank you.